All right, we'll bring the Plan Commission and Park and Rec Committee meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Okay, I'm going to start with Plan Commission. Justin will not be here tonight. Jan,
Here.
David, Stephanie, Richard, Crystal,
Here.
Sonia. In Park and Rec, we have Steve,
Here.
Emma,
Here.
Seth,
Here.
Andrew,
Here.
and Cindy.
Here.
All right. Item number 2, first period for public comment. If you have a public comment, please come up to the lectern and then you hit the person on the microphone and we'll keep our comments to 3 minutes. Also state your name and your address, please. No one online? All right. We'll go ahead and move on to 3, review and approval of extraterritorial certified survey map E6973E, Sidey Hollow Road.
Okay, the Park and Rec can kind of ignore this part because this is strictly Plan Commission. This is an extraterritorial map outside of the city limits, but within the jurisdiction that we need to have you guys review this. We do have the owners of the properties here tonight, so if you have questions in regards to this, what I understand is that you're splitting off a portion of the property and then you're going to be staying in the area where the buildings are and selling off the other parts, I believe. So if you want to explain what you're doing, if it's the opposite direction, yeah, if you want to come up to the lectern and explain exactly what you're doing. I'm terrible with maps, so it's great that you're here.
Just, you got to hit the person.
Should I start over? Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you. So what we're doing is dividing the property now. We have no current plans to sell either parcel of the property. We want to be prepared for someday. So the eastern portion, the 31 acres, includes all the buildings, the house, the pole shed, the other outbuildings. The second portion is 12.92 acres. That's the western edge of the property. Our thought is someday, if and when we do decide to sell, we'll sell the 31-acre parcel and keep the 12.92 acre parcel with the idea that we would build a house that is better for aging in place. The current house we're in, love the house, love the property, but it is from the basement to the attic. It's 4 stories and we are not getting any younger.
So basically, how extraterritorial works is that you guys are getting this mainly for informational. So basically, if you want to approve this, they have the right to have it approved. So all you need to do is forward it on to council for their approval on. And we would need a motion for that.
Lori, I got a question for you. Is there time, should we make the motion first and then ask any discussion or questions? Right?
Yes.
Okay. I make a motion to approve the request to, you got to help me with language, Lori. The request to split
Yeah, well, just to approve the extraterritorial CSM.
extraterritorial. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
This is Richard. I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Go ahead.
I guess that my only question would be, is there a weird easement, or not weird, but is there an easement and access issues to the second part of the property that we need to?
I am not good at this, am I? It's a good question, Jan. And no, both parcels front onto Sidey Hollow Road.
Any other discussion? All right, is this a roll call or just voice vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
Okay,
So
thank you,
this'll-
everybody.
So this will go on to council then at the end of the month. Thanks.
Thank you, Crystal.
You bet.
All right, we'll move on to item 4, discussion with
Crystal,
possible.
I'm gonna hang up on you now.
Okay, thank you.
All right, bye now.
Bye.
Discussion with possible action regarding existing conditions report for comprehensive plan and comprehensive outdoor recreation plan.
So Kristen Fish Peterson from Redevelopment Resources here today to walk through this. Kristen, I have the PowerPoint that Michael sent ahead on your behalf up on screen. If you'd like me to start there, I also have the full existing conditions report loaded up and ready to go. So we can, if you just want to go ahead and drive and tell me where you want to go, I'm happy to do so.
Sure, thank you, Nate. As Nate said, I'm Kristen Fish Peterson from Redevelopment Resources. We're partnered with Studio GWA on this project. Studio GWA is working on the comprehensive park and rec plan as well as the historic preservation plan, and they made a presentation to the Historic Preservation Committee yesterday about that part of it, and we're here to present the rest of it, and hopefully my two colleagues are online, Michael and Ashley. So I'll start with the comprehensive plan. And the existing conditions report is a very lengthy document. It's got a lot of detail in it. What I'd like to do is highlight some of the survey results that we found and kind of walk into the existing conditions. And then we have a little bit of an opportunity for somewhat of a focus group with this group to ask you some questions, to react to a few things, so that when we do move into the goal writing, which is the next step, writing goals and recommendations, that we have feedback from you at this point. So I'm going to follow along on my copy here. So like I mentioned, we're going to go over some results and have some discussion and then next steps. As far as on the next slide, our community engagement summary, we've spent quite a bit of time talking to people in the community. We did receive feedback on a survey that started on February 28th and closed on April 15th. We had 316 complete responses to that survey. It was available through the city's website and social media and email. Physical hard copies were available, and we did have about a dozen or so hard copies that were filled out by people who were more comfortable using a hard copy. We also did a significant number of stakeholder interviews and some community events. The community events the stakeholder interviews were a variety of folks from developers, contractors, small businesses, large businesses, education, healthcare. We tried economic development. I did a significant number of interviews with economic development folks. We tried to hit a really broad spectrum of the community with those interviews. And then the community events, I want to ask you to go to the next slide in case I outlined those. I might not have on there. Okay, I did not. The community events that we held included some intercept surveys at Nelson Ag, as well as a baseball game at the end of June. Also, we did a good 2-hour listening session, town hall type forum with the group led by Driftless Threefolding. And there were probably about 50 people in that event. Trying to think, was there anything else that we did? I think that was it. So as far as response to the survey is concerned, and I'm going to try to go fairly quickly through some of this because I'm hoping you did look at the existing conditions report. I don't want to rush, but between this and then Ashley and Michael's time to go over the comprehensive park and rec plan, I want to make sure we have enough time for everything. So slow me down if I'm going too fast, please. Respondents to the survey were 76% residents, 24% non-residents. People were overall very positive about the quality of life in Viroqua, really happy with every aspect of the community. The top three priorities for improvement included housing affordability, availability of housing, and business or job opportunities. The top 3 types of housing identified were single-family detached housing, duplexes, and senior living, assisted living. This question is always interesting because we want to know what respondents would be willing to pay more taxes for. And that they answered the question at all is a good sign. But upgrades and improvements or additional pedestrian and bicycle pathways upgrades to parks and amenities, and then to improve the look and feel of downtown were the top responses on what people would be willing to pay more taxes for. The next slide looks at the type of development that should be encouraged in Viroqua. Beyond natural area and open space preservation, folks really are interested mostly in residential development, followed by commercial development, farmland preservation, mixed-use buildings, and then lastly, industrial. The next question was, what's missing or lacking in Viroqua? Housing options and restaurants were the top two. The rest are following there. Activities for children was up there as well. In response to the question, this is kind of a visioning question on the next one. Did I miss one?
Nope, you're there.
Okay. In the future, I want Viroqua to be, and so the responses were open-ended, but we characterized or grouped them. Small town character and thoughtful growth, provide environmental and climate leadership, an inclusive and welcoming community, thriving across generations, affordable, and a local economic strength, a vibrant arts, culture, and food scene, and a walkable, friendly, bike-friendly, and providing infrastructure amenities. Those were the top answers under visioning for the community. So I kind of went over this a little bit on the next slide. The 25 people were interviewed in these categories. I thought we had a great cross-section of representation in the community. And then here's a summary of the community events where we talk to people. Intercept surveys on, excuse me, it's the end of May, time really flies. End of May at Nelson Egg and Park Bowl during a baseball game. We, Ashley and Michael were here in town for the May 31st Farmers Market. And then we had that community forum on the evening of Saturday, May 31st with, at the Viroqua Commons. So getting into existing conditions, you know, the comprehensive plan has 7 big bucket chapters or topic areas that it has to focus on, including housing, transportation, utilities and community facilities, ag, natural and cultural resources, economic development, and intergovernmental cooperation and land use. These are state statute prescribed chapters. So we went through the previous comprehensive plan to see where we were at that point in time and updated everything in these chapters for existing conditions based on interviews with staff and data that we procured from secondary sources, for example, in the housing and economic development categories, and then in the other categories. So I don't know if I have a summary here. I don't. As you read through this, I did want to ask you if you had any general thoughts. And we do have some questions on this next slide for goals, a goals discussion. So I guess this is where we open it up for feedback from the group after reading the report. On this next slide, there are questions here we can walk through now, or we can come back to them after we listen to Ashley and Michael talk about their portion. The way we structured it, we thought we would close out this discussion on the overall comprehensive plan with a discussion about goals, and then they would move into their presentation on the comprehensive park and rec plan.
So from an agenda standpoint, Steve, we would move on to agenda item number 5, and then we could come back to agenda item number 4 to resume the PowerPoint.
Does that work?
That works. All right, so let me pull up my agenda here. We will move on to item number 5, discussion with possible action regarding goal setting by topic area for comprehensive plan and comprehensive outdoor recreation plan.
Thank you. I've listed all the chapters here and a few questions that might come up, but one topic I do want to discuss under issues and opportunities that I discovered when talking with the police chief and the fire chief is Viroqua's population counted accurately? And it feels like from their perspective, it's not. It feels like there are more people in Viroqua than are showing up on the census. And through the data that we have access to, when the fire chief or the fire department or the police department responds to a call, oftentimes there are several residents living in, or several people living in a home or a dwelling unit that, with, you know, multiple mattresses on the floor kind of thing. We also have the dynamic, that Vernon County is a recipient county for group homes, and there are a significant number of group homes in Viroqua where the residents are coming from a different county, but they're counted in the county they come from, not the county that they're in now. So they're in Viroqua, living in a group home, and there are examples of significant or an increased number of calls to the police department or to 911 when people in a group home are lonely, they're scared, they're, it's a holiday and they're hearing loud noises, something happens, you know, and these are making increased calls to public services that are to people who aren't residents of the community. So I don't know what we can do about it, but I wanted to make you all aware that that is a dynamic where your public service entities are being stressed more than the population of the community is showing.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
I think I remember seeing something about the increase in calls comparatively. Can you speak to that in the, in this, current report about how many, there's additional, whatever is 25 or 24% increase in calls to Viroqua PD? Was that in this report?
Yes.
Okay.
And that was directly from my conversation with the police chief in response to, you know, it may or may not all be to group homes, but that is a significant contributing factor. So it was enough to mark in his mind, you know, to note that. So when we staff a police department, it's usually so many officers per 1,000 of population. And right now, the police department is, I think they're down 2 positions that they're hiring for, but they're also a complete position short compared to the population that is on the census. So they're probably even shorter, considering there might be a couple hundred more people in town. I don't know how many. You know, it's hard to put a number on it. But if there are a significant number of group homes in Viroqua, and those calls, a number of calls are coming from them, then that would put extra stress on the police department.
Lori, how is the census updated in between actual censuses, right? So every 10 years, they do an actual count. And then how do they update the approximation every year?
The state gets a report on new homes and things like that, and then they do an estimation. And then we have the ability to challenge that, but that's the first I'd heard that group homes are not counted here, but are counted from somewhere else. That surprises me. And that's probably why everybody always wants an alcohol license, thinking our population went up, because that's one of the main things they always ask about. So I'm really surprised by that. And who we could talk to about changing that, whatever that is.
So three general themes. One is the 2020 census obviously happened in a very odd time where I don't know how accurate those numbers are, but everybody dealt with it and they carried on with it throughout the pandemic. We also know that the data that Lori just talked about that helps spur on annual estimations doesn't take into account things that you mentioned, Kristen, that was reported by the chiefs, right? If they're going on strictly building permits for new residential units, they're not capturing additional individuals per household, right? There's no mechanism if kiddo moves back in with mom and dad, there's no permit for that, right? So there's nothing to catch that. And the third thing, and this is sort of beyond what you were talking about, is the area of Viroqua is growing. I think Sarah Granger talks about this often, where while the city has not seen a large population growth, certainly Vernon County has. And while there's many of those residents, and you could see by the numbers you had about 25% of your respondents were non-residents, I would bet to guess that those people still call Viroqua their city, even if they're out in the townships. So I think those three things would be themes I would recall as you asked that question, but curious to think of what the actual residents of this community see.
We can do a bit of research to find out, to confirm that those folks in group homes are counted in the county that they are coming from, and then try to quantify how many are here.
Can you get, I mean, just curiosity, like matter of scale, are we talking 10 to 20, 30 people? Are we talking hundreds?
We're talking, I thought he said that there were 100 group homes in Viroqua. I don't know if that's true.
I could probably collaborate that because they all came to the November election.
Oh, sure.
There was a lot more that we registered in November.
We'll try to get a count somehow.
Sorry to belabor this. When you're talking to Viroqua PD, so how are they counting the number of calls? And then do they also count what kind of calls they are? Like, I know it was in the report, but is that part of something that they do, is keep track of how many calls and what the nature of the calls are?
I'm pretty sure they do, yes.
I'm not on public safety, so I don't know.
I didn't get a breakdown for the type of crime or domestic dispute or vehicle accident. I didn't receive that kind of a report, but I would think they would track that.
Does anybody else have any general perspectives on Kristen's comments about population? Like, what is the feel? What are you seeing? I know at this point it's just your individual perspective, but again, that's why we've sort of assembled this group, is to sort of have feedback on, does the existing conditions report match up with your perspective or your perception of reality, right?
I feel like I've met at least a half dozen families, just me personally, in the last 4 years that have moved here primarily for the school options. So they're families of young children. Primarily they come for the Waldorf school. They're coming from other states. Sometimes they're coming from out of the country, and they're coming here because it's affordable and there's some school options that they're interested in. So I honestly, and I don't know if it was because I was so isolated during COVID and not meeting people, but it seemed like in 2023, 2024, I kept meeting all these new people, and they're the similar demographic. So that's been my experience, but Jan's been here a long time, so you would know.
Well, I can maybe lend a little info that is data driven from the co-op at least, right? So we're seeing right now at this moment a 10.6% increase in the number of shoppers per week in the co-op. So we ran 800 to 830 transactions a day, which means probably 1,100 people every day in the store, and we're now running 1,000 transactions a day, which means more like 1,300 people in the store every day. Every day. It's like just barely 978, I think, was one day in the last couple of weeks. So that's pretty great, consistent data, right? And we also have a huge increase in membership. So, and here's just a little example of that. Like, we've run for years at maybe 3 new members a week, and now we're hitting 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 per week. So what that says to me is not necessarily in town, but people who come here for the summer, who, reside here through the summer, at least more often, are joining the co-op, visiting us, and it's becoming a pattern that is different than what we're used to. Like the influx is quite different.
Jan, did you say most of them are not local addresses then?
No, I'm not. I'm just suggesting that I think what we're seeing in our retail environment is more of a tourist season, right? And of people that we see for 3 months consistently, 3-4 months from the onset of the fishing season to when school finally starts, of people who are residing in the area and shopping weekly and joining the co-op that may not live here year round. So it's pretty marked change. So we just hit a $12 million year. So that means $1,000 a month, or I mean, $1 million a month. And that's a 4.5 increase last year, and we're budgeted for the same. So that's big for our demographic and unusual. Not the regular pattern.
Kristen, I was just wondering, I know you met with realtors and things like that. Did you talk to the title companies by chance? The reason I ask that is because we're getting an influx of people moving in, moving out in our utilities area and whatnot, because I'm seeing them come across asking about special assessments and this kind of thing. And maybe they would have some insight on, did they go from a 2-person house to a 4-person house or whatever? I don't know if they keep those types of records, but it might be another option to check into.
Yeah, I guess my experience since I moved here in 2007 or 17, I feel in town, it's like, I feel like I always meet new people, but I'm always saying goodbye to old friends. So I feel like just at least in town, there does feel to be like a circulation of sorts. But then I know for a fact, every time I drive out in the country, it seems like there's a new house going up. So to me, it seems like there's more development going on outside of city limits than inside city limits, but hopefully soon to change responsibly.
I just wanted to call attention to that item. Want to move on. Other questions or goals we could talk about related to housing. We don't do an in-depth housing study for the comprehensive plan, but it might not be a bad idea to have an in-depth housing study so you know exactly the demand forecast. We have anecdotal evidence that people want single-family homes, duplexes, and senior housing because that is what the survey said. But that was 316 responses. So one recommendation might be for a formal housing needs assessment. There may be one, I think there was one done at the county level or working on that. I'm not sure, but that could be a recommendation just so we can get a very clear handle on the demand. Any other recommendations or goals that you think we should set related to housing? And I guess we can move into the other topics. I don't want to take this, we can take it one item at a time.
Can you just define like what group home is for everybody, just what it might include?
Okay, sure. It would be a communal living space or a house with many bedrooms for people with disabilities, cognitive developmental disabilities. So there would be live-in case managers or service providers to help them. Yep.
And it's specifically, intellectual and developmental disabilities. It doesn't include anything regarding like abuse shelters or recovery.
Typically
homes,
not.
Transition from homeless, anything like that?
Well, what the police chief was referring to were the group homes for developmentally or cognitively disabled individuals. I think there would be a number of calls to probably senior citizens for falls and things like that the fire department handles, probably lift assist.
I just have one other question. When you were talking about people making, police department saying multiple mattresses on the floor. And so I was thinking about at the school district, how they define homelessness for students. I mean, if you don't have a certain amount of space or a bedroom or privacy, then you're considered functionally homeless. So we don't have homeless shelters here. So I'm curious how we define that.
That's another great point, and that did come up in some of the interviews or the community feedback that we don't have a homeless shelter here, and people do congregate at the library and other places that there might be an opportunity to serve that need in the community. Anything on transportation? There was an Easter egg in the report, if you noticed it. It was a mistake. I don't know if did we fix that and did we take it out?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, they haven't received, what's on the website is the updated one.
Okay.
Well, it went out to the group and just for clarification, the version that you folks have should be deleted and destroyed. Kristen had made a error, and that from the 2020, or from the 2006 comp plan, there was conversation about the bypass. And then that was conflated with the fact that La Crosse County is talking about a bypass for 1461. And so there was a reference again in this recent one about a bypass, which I can assure you is not on the table for discussion. So again, we just wanted to make sure that it was clear. If you read through your current version, don't, like, get
Don't
rid of that
panic.
one.
Yeah.
I had
don't-
intended to send out new ones to you, but just if you come across that, know that it's just a complete error.
It's hidden in there. So the chapter on utilities and community facilities covers everything from sewer, water, stormwater, other utilities. Then it includes police, fire, school districts, the library, other community facilities. So, the concerns that I heard from the fire department were around staffing and planning for the future in staffing. We'll probably be addressing that in the goals. Similarly with the police department, I think everybody's happy with their physical space right now, and that thinks that those physical spaces are good for through this comprehensive planning effort anyway. In the sewer and water utilities, think the capacity is good. It's if large scale developments come along, they'll need to have some conversations, but for now, capacity is good.
Kristen, just in the interest in engendering conversation, can you perhaps give us an example of what type of goal you're looking for at this point, right? Because the agenda item says goal setting, but I think what might be helpful is to understand, like, how general is the goal? Is it intended to be a SMART goal where it's very specific and action oriented, or are we just talking big picture here? Maybe from some of the other groups you work with, you can give us some examples of goals that they've set that is sort of what you'd be looking for at this point in time.
Sure, and we'll have an opportunity for, after we develop some goals, for feedback on those goals. So, we're not asking you to pull a rabbit out of the hat, but I wanted to stimulate your thought around this. I think comprehensive plans generally are very high level and somewhat, I don't want to say vanilla, but they're less specific. And I think you have an opportunity to make this a working document that really guides the efforts of the city council and the other committees and the work of staff. So I would say the goals should be more specific. They should be actionable with a timeline. And I want to make sure that sometimes it's just enough to say you have to be aware that if you receive a large development, be aware that you might have to do some capacity planning, because we can't really plan for capacity we don't know is coming, but we can have those conversations around the table about what would that look like. So one specific opportunity, I think there's a desire in the community for, you don't control the landfill, but you might have an opportunity to weigh in on how that's handled. I don't know. It's a county landfill, correct? There are people that are interested in trying some different scientific principles around solid waste. And, it would be probably to Viroqua's benefit to have a seat at the table and be part of those conversations when the question, one of the visioning questions that came up was, or one of the visioning comments was, being advanced climate leadership, provide environmental and climate leadership. And there's a desire to be advanced and be kind of an example to other communities as far as how a community handles its solid waste, whether it's through the landfill or other creative and sustainable ways. And we wouldn't be dictating what those would be, but we would say, be proactive about considering other options than just the traditional methods of handling solid waste. That would be an example of a goal. the economic and housing goals are easier for me to define. I think as far as housing is concerned, one goal would be make sure your zoning code is open and ready for every type of missing middle housing that exists. So in missing middle housing is everything that isn't a single family home or a high density multifamily development, but it's everything in between. So it's a duplex, a triplex, a quad, townhomes, condos, and then pocket neighborhoods or cottage court. Right now, most zoning codes don't accommodate cottage courts because the setbacks are different, the density is different, the lot size is different. You're not meeting you have to make your minimum lot size a lot smaller for a cottage court. So one recommendation might be to make sure your zoning code is acceptable or amenable to pocket neighborhoods, for example. That would be a very specific goal that would accommodate missing middle housing development.
What's that term you're using?
Cottage court or
Well, the last, something metal housing.
missing middle housing? Missing middle.
Middle.
Middle, it's the
House.
middle, it's the housing in the middle from in between a single family home on a quarter acre lot, your traditional detached and high density multifamily residential. I have a book. I have a whole book on it. It's a yellow book. I love it.
So to that degree, any goals, and again, this is your perspective, right? In your role as plan commission and park and rec, this is more in plan commission's wheelhouse right now, but I think we would be open to hearing when anybody has to say regarding goals. I think you brought up a good one, like we would like our zoning code to be open to missing middle housing. I think that's in the ballpark of the scope and size and generality of a goal.
things you can control as a city. Yeah.
Can I
Uh,
just ask what falls under land use? That's kind of broad. So what would that cover?
So the land use chapter, we look at your current land use and then we create a future land use map. And that is, where do we think, what type of development do we think is going to occur on these properties in the future? So it's all about making sure that you have that future land use map, and then that really governs how you allow development to happen in the future. It's pretty specific.
Is transportation, is that open to pedestrian as well as, okay. Could I set a goal for, we have a sidewalk that actually goes to the elementary school? Like, I feel like that's a goal that needs to be met.
Yeah, just having safe corridors for children. Yeah, across town.
What's nice about that particular one is we literally just did our bike and pedestrian plan that was approved and everything you guys are saying. So a good, a very simple goal would be to, as part of the comprehensive plan, reinforce the desire to start knocking off projects within
Yeah.
the bike and pedestrian.
Follow that plan.
Right.
We should follow that plan. It's a goal.
One thing I've been reflecting on with this is related to Eckhart Park is like how much of some of these decisions are really based on people's, like the meaning that they attribute to this community. So depending on their values and why they move here, if they've lived here for a really long time. And we kind of end up in these little sticking points over the years. I've noticed when we're in the sort of hot spot of like where our values are and the meaning that we attribute to this, and what it's reminded me of is just like the importance of civic engagement and sort of that bilateral communication. And what is the process in which we have goals? Because I think when we go really long periods of time, I go and I read about really successful things that people do in other states and how they roll out these big plans. And so this idea of bidirectional communication and engagement that's ongoing, because if there's something we're missing or something to do with how we are nominating or bringing forward people that have a real interest or desire to contribute or volunteer towards that may have been here, and just start to really span some of our community members that maybe don't typically cross paths and have more opportunities to work together.
Can you tell me how is there a goal in there with what you just said?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm trying to find the words for it. I think what I'm trying to speak to is what are the opportunities or to promote opportunities for civic engagement and mentorship, whether it's be through high school students, whether it be through inviting community members to apply to serve into some capacity of leadership or civic engagement, have there be more transparency around that. So that's one piece that I'm trying to articulate. And then I think the second piece is the bidirectional communication piece of, like, as things are staged out, there's a good sort of back and forth so people can ask questions or be part of the process. Because I think in my experience, it just helps people feel like they are part of something.
I think those would be goals for the issues and opportunities chapter that would be an overall kind of an umbrella goal for each other topic that comes up, every other topic.
Great. Anybody else at this juncture?
Once we develop the goals based on all the feedback we received and the existing conditions and where we think from our professional experience, the community could head. And I think on the next slide, there's a timeline, just to let you know that we'll be having an open house in early September. The date is to be determined, but we'll have those goals for people to react to.
Something that concerns me, it's kind of overarching goal is when is enough enough? More housing, more tourists, more industry. We don't want to lose. There's something that we have here. Part of it is our size, I think. And if we keep growing, I don't know, it's just something that I ask myself, we don't want to lose what we have.
I don't know if you can keep people away though.
Yeah, but there's a way, I don't know. I just know that people have told me about cities that have changed so drastically because they just went gangbusters with industry or with whatever tourism. I always bring up the Dells, but I don't know. That would be my goal, is to not lose something that makes this place special. I don't know.
Well,
How do you define that? I don't know.
I think inherently what you're talking about, Cindy, is the point of comprehensive planning, right? Is the idea of smart growth, right? To the best that you can, growth is organic, and sometimes despite whatever we can do to stifle it or slow it, growth is coming if the ingredients are right for the community. And it's about setting yourself up so that it happens in a smart way so that you don't lose those pieces. And that's part of this whole thing. And so
zoning has a lot to do with it, doesn't it?
zoning, transportation, right? Some of the decisions we make around civic engagement, right, is the people who decide. And land use zoning, right? Absolutely. Kristen, I don't know, that's just my general reaction to what he said, but is there some way that can be tangibly put into a goal? Or is that just an overall comment, Cindy?
No, that would be my goal, is, to somehow, do smart growth. Well, I just, I don't know exactly how to put that, but,
I think the market drives some of that, and then it's the ability of the city to react or proactively prepare from a capacity standpoint, whether, if your budgets aren't going to handle, if the physical property growth doesn't pay the freight on infrastructure expansion or whatever, then they'll have a financial issue to deal with. So it is a good thing that development takes time. I don't see your commercial or industrial growth being so aggressive right now. I see it more like Viroqua is an awesome place to live and people want to live here. So I see you having to manage your housing growth, and hopefully then your infrastructure can keep up with that, and your budgets and your financial, your public services and everything else. If we plan it out in the comprehensive plan to be measured, that's the idea, so that everything will keep up with it. But we can work on how to make sure that is at a pace that's community friendly.
This is Michael. I think what Kristen's talking to, and I think what Cindy's trying to get at too, is the idea of community character, which can either be, a goal as a goal in and of itself, or particularly an objective underneath. So I have that noted, but gosh, at its best, that's what planning and zoning does, right? Just to make sure that things are context appropriate, complements adjacent land uses, doesn't compromise community character. So I'll probably defer to Kristen and Dana on the write-up for that, but I just want to make sure that that's noted, and maybe I'll frame it as community character.
And I think that was kind of what I was getting at with the first one, which is like, what people do you have at the table, because I know you had lots of stakeholders and people working, say, in nonprofits and things like that, social services. I'd be really curious to hear from people that are trying to move here but can't find a place to live, that are getting employed, and how often do we hear from people that are kind of in the margins and the struggle of what it is to, and particularly just in that income, it's interesting looking at our income levels in this area, and just that sort of like asset limited, income constrained, employed, where housing, when I moved here 18 years ago, was much more accessible than it is now. And so, because if we want, not all of the jobs here are going to be high paying. And so even if you're an entry level teacher at the public school, sometimes you're not going to be able to afford a single family home here.
What was created with COVID and companies opening their eyes to remote working, that's why this town is so sought after, is people can move here and keep their $100,000 a year job in Arizona and enjoy our space, and that makes it harder on the people that have to work and afford life around here at the same time with what wages can be made. I'm sure that's an obvious side to a lot of it.
I do think, though, that we're starting to explore a little bit, like the different groups that are looking at housing and different things in here, that we can start to address what other communities have done to keep character in their community. Like, and zoning is a big part of that, of course, but I mean, even the communities that have limited, just for an example, communities that have limited how many Airbnbs as a percentage in their community, so that there's this point in time where it just doesn't keep going to Airbnb, right? It just as one example of how communities struggle to, and maybe succeed at, retaining character and making sure that there's balance for housing, especially.
We definitely don't want to have the issue that like Nashville has, where whole communities are bought out of their properties because of Airbnbs wanting to take over the space, and happen quickly.
Pardon me.
Sorry, and this was just recently like someone brought this up with me, which was so when we have Airbnbs that are maybe run by non-residents, are there any special fees or income that's derived from that? Because like when people come and work remotely and they're bringing their salaries in, part of me is like, well, that it makes a very competitive housing market, but also brings a lot of income into our area. They go spend money at the Broca Food Co-op, for example. So it's probably, I don't know if it's a net gain or loss. Maybe it affects us positively in some areas and negatively in others. But I'm also just interested in learning about what are the mechanisms in which we can, if people are capitalizing on our beautiful town and running their Airbnbs, that we are, generating these cultural activities and restaurants for, then is there some sort of way in which to have fees attached to that?
Hopefully you're collecting room tax from, you are, okay. So I would say, if there were to be a way to max out the room tax opportunity, but then those funds have to be used to attract more visitors. So, that's a good thing, but also they need a place to stay.
I'll just piggyback off of Emma, is that, the Housing Advisory Group is doing work with regards to short-term rentals, but I think there's also probably a whole additional part of that, which is just administratively knowing what can we do, like what options are in front of us, right? And that's part of the plan that you'll probably find us doing is it's not so much, hey, what action steps, but we have to make action steps to figure out what we want to do, right? And that's part of it. So with the short-term rentals, it's like we don't even know what we can do before we start deciding what we want to do. And you know, we talked about, Lori and I have been struggling with this for years about how much transparency is there with the data that we're receiving from these marketplace providers. We get a lump sum of money, but after that, we have no idea how many, who it's coming from, which properties it's coming from. It's very opaque.
And there's also just recently some legal issues that are happening when communities are trying to regulate these types of Airbnbs, that they're getting shut down and it's coming back on the communities because they're trying to stop it. So there's a lot of things that are happening in the background with that would have to be explored.
I would just love to learn more about what the options are and what people have successfully done and how they've leveraged that, is what you're saying, just to know what's possible besides room tax or.
I was gonna bring up Door County. I know they definitely have a lot of tourists and a lot of people up there, but haven't they been able to keep out the McDonald's and the franchises? And how did they do that if they were able to do that? Door County?
They do have franchises in Sturgeon Bay. North of Sturgeon Bay, they have been able to keep them out, and that's handled as a part of their zoning in each community.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think that's part of it, is a rural community that's on the cusp of growing. I think smart growth in 2006 was very new. And I think part of what it is identifying which bodies of this government or the community groups need to be educated on how to approach some of these issues, whether it be transportation or any number of those in there. We're starting to, I think, getting educated so we know what actions we can take, and then implementing said actions is a very large goal, but at the heart of what we're talking about right now, right? I think we're all learning.
We have another large chunk of the report to go through, and I don't want to rush past this topic, but I want to probably hand it over at this point to Ashley and Michael for the Comprehensive Outdoor Recreation Plan Existing Conditions Report.
That's good, thank you.
Number 4 real quick.
I can do that. Once I find my agenda again. So we're going to go back to item number 4, discussion with possible action regarding existing conditions report for the comprehensive comprehensive outdoor rec plan.
Great, thank you. And it's good to see some of you. We were in town yesterday to talk about the historic preservation plan as well. And just a quick note on that, I think that aligns probably nicely with that small town character goal that was mentioned earlier within the historic preservation plan. So just wanted to note that before we jump into the comprehensive outdoor recreation plan here. If we can go to the next slide, please. So just quick agenda, we'll have a summary of our community engagement activities. We did work hand in hand with Kristen and Dana on that. So whenever we had the opportunity to talk about the comprehensive plan, we also took the opportunity to talk about the outdoor recreation and the historic preservation plan so that we were kind of capturing that audience all at once. So I'll kind of breeze through some of those engagement activities here, but we'll spend a little bit of time on it. Then we'll do the overview of the parkland inventory, which is kind of the bulk of the report and the existing conditions. It's really just outlining what you have. So then we can talk next about the goal setting and where we want to go from there. So if we can head to the next slide. Like Kristen mentioned, we did the community survey. We had about 7 questions related to parks and recreation. So we'll go through a few of those here on the next couple slides to see the results of that. If you can go to the next one, Kale. Thank you. So one question was, how often do you or other members of your household visit Viroqua Parks? And most respondents said frequently, once a week or more, and regularly once a month. So really, we have quite a few. I think there's really only a handful of folks that never have visited, and I don't know what that situation might be necessarily, but really good to see that there's a lot of people attending parks on the regular. Next slide, please. So of the following parks, which ones have you visited in the past 12 months? And you can see a big spike for Eckhart Park, a lot of people attending and going there on the regular. Right behind that is the Park Bowl. And of course, their proximity is noted. It's almost operating like a complex of areas there. So you can see kind of the other results behind that. Within this, I think it's also worth noting, which ones maybe have fewer visitors, which would be Cedar Meadows Park, and then some of the Bechdel Park. The other respondents were that, they hadn't visited a park in the last 12 months. Next slide, please. We asked the question of what improvements would you like to see in Viroqua Parks? And you can see more trails and more restrooms rank at the higher end of that. And then behind that would be better playgrounds, more benches. And we also captured what folks mentioned within the other and tried to, see if there were any themes amongst that. So good to see that response. And then, to Kristen's point from the survey done earlier of what people are willing to pay more taxes on, this was one of the items within the parks and amenities that people mentioned that they would be willing to pay additional taxes for. So good to see what the, kind of next level of that, if you were to spend more money on it, what pieces would you like to see within that? Next slide, please. Question 25 and 26 here. We're trying to get a sense of if people are going to other communities for recreation and parks, and if so, where. So most said no, upwards of, about 65% there. But of those who said yes, most were going to either La Crosse or Westby for additional activities. We have a couple write-ins for Viroqua, so maybe they're not from maybe those were the folks that are not from Viroqua, but are visitors to Viroqua, and parks are one of the things that bring them here. Next slide, please. So of the focus groups, like Kristen mentioned, we talked to quite a few folks. We did 2 focus groups, one virtual, one in person. We reached out to about 25 stakeholders. We're able to get and have further conversation with about 10. And then talked about the topics you see below there on recreation programming, understanding visitors, communications, all of the facilities, and then also about future planning. And in that future planning discussion, I think we talked somewhat about goals, but now is kind of our good, next check-in point. Now that there's more information out there, the research has been gathered within this existing conditions report to be able to have further conversation on that. So we're looking forward to that at the end of this discussion here. Next slide, please. And our takeaways from that is that there are a lot of successful programs and partnerships already happening in the community. Quite a variety, especially given the size of the community. There was a lot of discussion about the public access to privately owned spaces, like Prairie Wind, for example. Hubbard Hills came up as well. And that really is a pretty special thing, I think, about the community that we've heard. You don't see that in every community, of that partnership between private and public, private space being open to public as well. So there's high demand and limited space. A lot of programs are using limited space or borrowing space from each other back and forth in order to make these programs happen, which is good that there's such an interest in these recreational programs, but then we have some space constraints within that. Other barriers to utilization, time. People are generally busy. That's hard to do, especially, if there's a traveling or club program. There was a mention as well of communication of news to me. So I think when we think about how do people find out about programs or opportunities, the communication is always an element that, we want to focus on. Next slide, please. A few more takeaways on communication, really just kind of a recap of what I just mentioned, of wanting those efforts to be more inclusive and far-reaching. And then a recap again, just in person. We heard it in the survey, but we also heard it in the focus groups of the amenities that are desired. Again, mostly restrooms, benches, trails as the number one things. And then for future planning, we talked about indoor and outdoor options, pickleball, basketball, and then the potential for population growth that goes into additional planning, coordination, amenities that the community might need. So very similar, to police, fire, and as the community grows, the need for additional park space or the demand on park space grows with it. Next slide, please. For the pop-up engagement, we really had, people really loved talking about the parks. That was a huge takeaway from when we were at the farmer's market. People just were really, I think, captured by this board in particular, and we got a lot of good feedback. We did hear from some of the kids that they would like a roller coaster, but I don't know if that's on the table for discussion. But we had a lot of great conversation with kids as well to understand their how they're using the parks, their kind of perception of it. And so that was, really good conversations. But the pop-up engagement kind of reinforced similar things. The trails and the playgrounds came up quite a bit. Next slide, please. So on that, we saw the top 10 parks that folks visited. Park Bowl came up a lot, Prairie Wind also right behind it. And so people were indicating with stickers which parks they attended regularly. And so that's how we were able to capture that data at the farmer's market. Again, on the right, you see the number of new or enhanced amenities requested. So they had a little sticker and would add it to the park that they wanted to see more activity at. So restrooms came in high and trails behind it. And I think just a comment on the restrooms, we are going through and doing an inventory of all of the amenities at each park, which Michael will talk a little bit more about. And I think, it's just one of those things that you can only spend so much time at a park before nature calls. So I think that was coming through in some of these responses that maybe people would spend even more time at the parks if they had some of these amenities. Next slide.
I'll also say too for this section, hopefully everybody can hear me okay. We did this is just kind of aggregate data, but because people were asset mapping for us and like pinpointing specific places, parks where they want amenity, we have that included and can certainly answer questions toward that now, or definitely just send everything upon completion of the plan. So, restrooms are, it's one thing to have them on a table, it's another thing to pinpoint them at a given park.
Yep. Yeah, next slide, please. I'll hand it back to you, Michael, to talk more through the inventory.
Yeah, so if you've read the existing conditions report, or really the Parks and Rec section of the report, it really has like two sections or subsections: the community engagement summary and then the parkland inventory. And I get to talk about that. First, our primary focus is, of course, city-owned parks. We're going to have far more detail in the report and in the workbook that's sent upon completion for city-owned parks. Mindful of the fact that residents probably don't look at parks that way, right? When it can be Prairie Wind for a soccer game or Hubbard Hills for hiking, just as much as it could be going to the Park Bowl to watch a game, right? But we're just giving kind of preferential treatment to city-owned parks, totaling 13. And that sums up to about 110 acres. Now, that also includes the city-owned portion of the golf course, which is about 81.2 acres, if I remember right. So, that kind of skews the data, but just everything that's city-owned, we're classifying and documenting. Each of the 13 parks are classified in accordance with NRPA guidelines. That stands for the National Recreation and Park Association. These are not hard and fast rules. They are guidelines, but they provide a description of the classification, the size of the park or open space that's associated with that classification, and kind of its primary role or what purpose it serves. You might ask, well, what's the importance of that? Well, what it allows us to do here in this report and by using these guidelines, it allows us to map the location, the classification, the service areas of these parks, and then determine kind of what you have and what you don't have, or what coverage you have or level of service you have, and then what level of service you don't have, which will be in the next, kind of our next work coming up here. There are about 12 classifications that are kind of typical. What we found by reviewing internally, reviewing with Kale, that we're using 4 classifications based on the parks that you have. Mini parks, neighborhood parks, community parks, and special use parks. Each of these have their own description in the report and are also tabulated by park as well. Next slide, please. So what you'll see here is the city boundaries for Viroqua, and then just a list of all the park names and their respective classifications. What I'll do for now is just describe like the classification and their size. Like mini parks typically have a very like niche context specific need, and therefore they're small. And you might also see some that are like, well, what is that park? Or I don't go to that park. For example, the grounds for the Viroqua Welcome Center. This is not something that we originally put in, but through discussion with Kale and Cindy, we thought, well, this is a city-owned property, right? And we know that redevelopment or rehabilitation of the Welcome Center is in progress. But from our understanding, there will be green space to the back. It's currently includes hitching posts for the horses on farmers market weekends, but there will also be community gardens, probably some amenities like benches, picnic tables. So we thought, that really fits a mini park. Like it's going to have limited needs met week in and week out. It's not going to be like a regional destination, but there's going to be enough amenities to say that that's park space. But that's small. It's 0.3 acres. But then that scales up to like neighborhood parks, which again the kind of primary customers, so to speak, are people of all ages that live in the adjacent neighborhood. Doesn't mean that folks throughout the community can't come, especially of the size of Viroqua. But equally too, because it can be accessed by all ages and abilities, in theory, you want to make sure that folks cannot just drive there, but walk or bike there. So to that point of accessibility, that's something in our purview as well. Ultimately, this will scale up then to special use parks or ultimately community parks. So when we're thinking like, we're calling it the complex, but the Park Bowl, Eckhart Park, we're mindful of the fact that residents and visitors alike can come from baseball games, can come to the Driftless Music Fest. And the size kind of meets the demand, so to speak, right? Combined, those are just higher than 11 acres. So again, most of the description is in the report, but wanted to at least tabulate them here and show a map. Can we go to the next slide? As mentioned earlier, residents don't think of parks by their jurisdiction or their NRPA classification. So we did think it was really important to just document the existing park facilities, not just simply to show the kind of assets that you have at your fingertips, but also some of these, due to their proximity, can serve kind of as a proxy for park services or park amenities in lieu of the city owning something. So when we're thinking of like Polo and Abbott Fields, Ruin Mason Fields, Bigley Pool, we're mindful of the fact that these provide a service to the community, even if it, doesn't mean that Kale has to mow that grass or, staff that, so to speak. So you'll see here, the legend is very hard to read. Hopefully everybody's received a map separately as well. But we do color code the park boundaries by city-owned facilities, school-owned facilities, privately owned facilities like Prairie Wind, county-owned facilities, and state-owned facilities. But you'll notice that most of the county-owned and all of the state-owned facilities are not in the planning area. That means they're not in the city boundaries with the exception of county fairgrounds. but they're also not in the jurisdictional planning area as well. Even like Sidey Hollow is outside of that planning area. So we do have that in our map, but it's just not shown here. Next slide. So as Ashley was mentioning, and I'm not sure if we need to take a break and bring up the agenda item, but what we'll be working on next are two things in the report, the park analysis section and the core goal setting. And the way we're going to kind of operationalize this from top to bottom is a vision statement, a value statement, there will be goals, and then there will be actions. We might get more granular than that just to make the implementation strategy kind of sync up together. But for the purposes of our conversation, we'll have kind of these topics or themes on which we'll subsume some of the goals. So just kind of a refresher, when we're talking goals here for the next slide, we want something that we feel like is kind of a core belief of the Parks and Rec Commission, that you think is kind of your duty and responsibility as commissioners, but also speaks for kind of the roles and responsibilities of Parks and Rec staff. But it also is not just aspirational, it's realistic, right? So you don't just want to be pie in the sky. You might want to have a goal that is speaks to the success that's already underway or aspires to something that's is a critique or a shortcoming within the park system. So just kind of equal parts aspirational but realistic. And we want to organize goals under the following themes. These will be on the next slide as well, but I'll go through them. Access and connectivity, natural and cultural resources, maintenance and operations, community health and wellness, education and awareness, funding and resource allocation, park planning and development, recreation programming, and facilities and amenities. Let's go to the next slide. So for example, I wanted to give just some sample goals, and I'll also preface this by saying, depending on our conversation, we can take fragments of our conversation and construct goals. We're also prepared to make something out of nothing, but be remiss if we didn't talk tonight and give you at least something to hang on to here. So, so for an example for access and connectivity, one goal could be enhance and expand the network of sidewalks, bikeways, shared use paths, and trails to improve connectivity between parks and other community destinations. As Nate mentioned, that might already be a goal that aligns with the adopted bike plan, PED plan, but it's nice to reinforce those, right? You want to make sure your plans are continuous and complementary together. Recreation programming. Expand and diversify recreational programs to cater to various age groups, needs, and interests. Another theme and potential goal could be for facilities and amenities, designing new facilities and retrofitting existing facilities for safety, accessibility, and inclusivity. But at risk of wasting all our time wordsmithing, I thought let's go back to go to the next slide. And let's maybe, if we can, spend about 10 minutes, see how far we get on goals that we could draft for each of these themes. Ashley, before I open it to discussion, is there anything I might have missed or any more context you want to offer?
No, I don't think so. Just curious to hear thoughts from the group.
I know I provided a sample goal for access and connectivity. Are there other features or traits or high-level goals that you'd like to see for improving, enhancing access and connectivity between city-owned parks?
Let me go ahead and change the agenda item and then
Yes.
go right into that if that's okay.
Sounds good.
So we'll move on to agenda item 5, discussion with possible action regarding goal setting by topic area for the outdoor comprehensive rec plan. Sorry if I cut you off there.
No, all good.
And maybe one place to start would be, if we do go back one slide, even just seeing, what we drafted there, does that align with, what this group sees as a good goal?
I would say yes.
I know the one I I'd kind of thought about with the, maybe like the programming and stuff. I know we talked probably a couple months ago about pickleball and doing the indoor, outdoor, getting a partnership going with Bill. I know Bill Schultz is upgrading Village Market Quillen's building, potentially into an indoor rec center. I don't know what his full plan is. If he's not now. Okay, well then never mind. We'll cancel that.
I'm curious your thoughts in that direction though of, I guess regardless of if that particular project is happening, is there something within, the prospective project that you saw as a long-term goal for the community?
Yeah, I mean, I think if that was the direction that he was going, using that as the space that we would maybe partnership, help kind of upkeep it, supply stuff, use that space to the full advantage because in wintertime it is tough to do certain things. And if people don't ski, play hockey, and they want to continue to play pickleball or some other activity that we can do indoors, my girlfriend is from Rhinelander. They have an amazing indoor facility complex, if you want to call it that, where they do year round of all athletics. And not that we want that kind of a draw, but that's a big thing. We send both of our hockey programs up to the Rhinelander area, and they travel and they do really well up there. So it's a potential goal.
Sure. I think I almost maybe heard two goals within that too, actually, was one being just around partnerships, and then the other around year-round activities for the community.
I don't know if this is a question for Kale, but I feel like every time we have a park and rec meeting and the amount of work that's involved just with maintaining. And so I think about like workforce development and support. I know the first time we met when I was starting my orientation, it's really easy to be like a big dreamer and want all the things, especially when there's like children looking at you. But I'm curious how the park plan includes, workforce development support for Kale and retaining him and supporting him or having the appropriate staff and scaling it that way, because I think we'll just really need to have a realistic picture of that. We want to keep you.
I'm noting that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's and one of the other themes is just really around maintenance. We had the opportunity to go around with Kale yesterday as well and just get a sense of all of the all of the grass that is being mowed and all of that space, and also how many or how few really people are doing that work. So that is definitely top of mind as we put things forward, and in the plan, the hope is right that this is the type of plan that can help support further funding for these types of things. But I think we just want to temper expectations as well as we probably won't be doing that roller coaster and building an amusement park, right? We're really focused on what you already have, and that is working well too.
Just a question of clarification on that point. Was he just showing you what he has to maintain for parks or the entire city? Because it's more than just parks that he has to maintain.
Right. Yeah, we did a tour. Oh, go ahead.
Showed him most of the parks, but pointed out a few areas that we still maintain as well. So they know.
Yeah, and even from our kickoff meeting, there's been kind of some DPW adjacent stuff, right? Like the other duties as assigned, plowing and things like that as well. So, yes, mindful of that. And, whether that scales into like a goal in and of itself or like specific actions underneath a given goal, like maintenance and operations, planning and development, that will be, doubly important.
I just wanted to bring up that in a previous council member always was bringing up the fact that we don't have a lot of things happening in the wintertime outside, as far as, I know we have the skating things and whatever, but he's always wanted to do a winter festival involving the community and things like that. So I don't know under recreational programming if that is something that you've looked at, like year-round things besides just summer and the skate park or whatever. I'm just bringing that up because I know when he was on Park and Rec as the chair, that was one of his big things, and he's not on the council anymore, but I know that's one thing that he hoped before he had left the council that something would have happened on that. So I just wanted to bring it up.
Tourism Commission has talked about that a lot in the chamber, needing some kind of a winter event. The problem is you can't count on snow. So, yeah, you have to think of something else.
Yeah, I hear you. That's a great idea. And similar to what Ashley was mentioning earlier, like, yeah, year-round activities being its own goal or action, but then also partnering with other organizations and trying to kind of pull in that same rope, so to speak, could be a sub-action of that. So
Michael, you might have answered this, but one of my goals I was thinking about is just to make sure, and I know the schools there and the fairgrounds, but to have park coverage in all areas of the city. And so the partnership still comes up with, some of those areas, but north of the city, I don't think there's really a park there. There might be a church, but just that was one of the goals I was thinking, just so all residents have access to a park.
yeah,
Great.
100%. We didn't bring this up earlier too, but the next section, kind of the parkland analysis that our team will be working on in earnest this month and next month. Why we have these NRPA guidelines and using the classifications is, each kind of will have its own service area. So we'll kind of run a radius tool with each of them, and then also work with Dana from Redevelopment Resources to make sure that the coverage by classification addresses Cal's question, right? And that would not only be with existing park facilities, but also like potential or in progress park facilities like Hanson Farm Park, or if there are prospective subdivisions, how does that affect it too? So that will be what we'll be working on here in the next couple months.
I know I'm talking a lot today, but this is like a part of why I joined city council. I mean, I love the parks here. The thing that is kind of staying out to me is just naming the need for like the cultural and aesthetic aspect of our parks. I mean, we're like going through a lot of discussion with Eckhart Park right now, and it's not, I don't see it in the goals, which is that the parks are beautiful. Whether that's plantings, whether that's tree selection, whether that's how things are designed. But I think people want to be in a beautiful space too, not just a functional one.
This is not on the screen, but we've started to draft some out because we wanted to give something to have as a point of discussion. But yeah, offhand, trying to remember what a draft goal towards that end, which I think was under natural and cultural resources, is design park facilities in a way that like showcases the aesthetic cultural features in a given district, whether that's cultural flair that a neighborhood is attributed to the distinction of a neighborhood, or like Washington Park and like the rock outcroppings, or like the bluff, for lack of a better word. Like that's cool. That makes for a really unique feature. And folks have said in state community engagement meetings, like, wouldn't it be cool if, probably not logistically possible, but wouldn't it be cool if we could do like rock climbing on that wall? And like that's the type of input you want that speaks to kind of the uniqueness of a park. So I think I'm hearing you correctly. I'm on that, just making sure that the cultural and aesthetic values of our parks are not lost here.
I think I have some, I don't know, facilities and amenities goals. One would be signage. I feel like our park system lacks signage. Because a lot of our parks are referred to as like Dragon Park, Chicken Park, which are not, those are not the names of the parks, but everybody with kids knows which parks those are. And I feel like if you don't have kids, you don't know which parks those are. That would be Washington Park because Drew has chickens right next to him. Yes.
Yeah.
So there's, I would like to see, I guess, a defined signage, because there's even a park that essentially I think it used to be somebody's backyard or the land. So like I found this out that it was not entirely a city park because I parked in their yard and they politely told me to move my car. I was like, oh, sorry. But I just think defined like signs that, yes, this is the city property, not a play structure in somebody's backyard. Also, I think one of the elephants in the room is, if at all possible, if we could identify a spot in town for a splash pad. I think that is one of the things I hear the most as far as regarding like amenities that our city needs. We used to have an outdoor pool. We no longer have an outdoor pool. But I don't see us getting a new outdoor pool, but I think a splash pad is something that we could move towards. But I think the problem is we don't have I guess within the council, it's hard to define a spot for that. So I know we need help finding that location.
Thank you. Yep, I've noted that.
I think that helps just reinforce too for the, year-round activities as well. So, sorry, I cut someone off.
No.
Sorry, it's tricky on the virtual.
Along with the signage, me being a 50-year native to this town, there's literally parks in this town that I've discovered in the last year of being on Parks and Rec that I did not know existed, and whether or not we could have maps that are very much more feasible to the public and knowledge, and I'm sure it could become something that gets orientated with the Welcome Center. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, great. Yeah, it's back kind of on the programming, but also on the communication.
Just on that splash pad, I think generally having an amenity plan of what is next, what is most wanted, and where does it go is something that we've been really struggling with. And because funding is so limited, being super careful about that and intentional would be something that would be very helpful as a goal of identifying that. I don't know if we'll get to that level of detail within this comprehensive outdoor recreation plan, but if not, it certainly should be a next step that's highlighted in the plan. The other thing I'll just note, and I think this has been a success, is the fostering of third-party recreational organizations to be part of the tapestry of Park and Rec. We see that, and as Kristen and Ashley and Michael pointed out, we see the success of that not only in terms of recreation, but also in terms of access to parks, right? Hubbard Hills and Prairie Wind and the VFW space, right? Like, how do we support those organizations so that they continue to do those sorts of things and maybe even grow in doing those things? Because the best thing about that is it's additional resources that are going to make those happen, not scarce, limited city resources. So I would really encourage that as a long-term goal, is to see how we can help grow those other organizations to do the work that adds to our mission, right?
Excellent point.
One question on the splash pad, because I don't know the answer. Can any of the potential Hanson Farm, not residential, but the commercial zone, or out by Sleepy Hollow, can any of that area be used for a potential splash pad?
I think I won't answer the question, but I'll answer by saying that's what we need to figure out, right? Like, that is a next goal, is to look through a list of potential locations and really dedicate time to that, because Cindy and I have been, that's been talked about alongside the Welcome Center / bathhouse is, well, can we put a splash pad back here? And some people are like, I don't think that would make a very good location. And some people are like, no, that would be a perfect location. And so going through that discussion and identifying, okay, where, how big, how much, just like what we're doing with Eckhart Playground. At least Eckhart Playground already has a location established, right? That's a long discussion, AJ, and that's part of what we need to talk through.
Mm-hmm.
We do have a very in-depth spreadsheet, which I don't know that you even want to see it, but we went through it with Kale, going through all of the amenities, how many benches do we have at every single park, how many picnic tables, restrooms, etc. So we will have that kind of inventory identified. And so when we start thinking about where we add things, that will be a very good help in that direction and helping to locate some of these amenities that are desired.
And Nate was speaking about, different attributes that would be ideal for a splash pad location, notwithstanding, but when we're talking the classifications that we were mentioning earlier, that's an attribute. The acreage or total size, other complementary amenities, which are all listed in the workbook that Ashley was mentioning. So, at least you have more data than less to make an informed decision, right? So I have that noted for part of our goals and actions as well.
I guess I'd also like to see, as far as the access and the connectivity, there's only, I think, one playground that are within a park that has a sidewalk to it. The others essentially don't have a sidewalk to them, which is also problematic with young kids when you're trying to get them to the park. None of our playgrounds have, I shouldn't say none, majority of them don't have assigned like parking spaces. So even if you say you wanted to go across town to a park, you basically just have to park on the side of the road. And I'm not advocating for parking spaces. I just think there's ways to connect the parks through means like paths or sidewalks. Probably also piggyback onto the bike and pedestrian plan.
Great.
Can we see the list again of all the categories that you wanted goals, possibly get goals?
Wondering if we could focus a little bit. We talked about, maps maybe at the Welcome Center. If we could talk a little bit about education and awareness for a little bit, I'd be curious to hear this group's thoughts on that. And I guess the question really is how do we best promote what you have? Yeah.
I think Kale's doing a wonderful job with his essentially the rec plan guides. He does a good job connecting the third parties as well as like the library and other entities around the community. It's once again, I think it's hard to get people that aren't necessarily looking to sign up for rec programming to look at those. But I know we only have a couple physical copies. They're mostly online. So I think, there's ways we could, I don't know, maybe if we had sponsors, we could mail them to people, via selling ads, that kind of thing. But it's hard to get people to look at a rec guide if they're not looking to sign up for rec. But then if they're not doing that, they're missing out on these other opportunities to see what else is going on in town.
Is library activities included in your guide? Okay.
I don't know if people know that.
Piggybacking on the signs comment earlier, signs, that direct people off Main Street, this park's this way, this park's this way. So people just stumble on it, driving through town. That seems like that might be a helpful thing too, rather than having to go look for the, a map somewhere or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, some directional signage. Well, I think that's a good start. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Up, and this has been brought up since when I was hired and interviewed for this, one thing that was talked about quite a bit was more programming for seniors. And so That's a pretty broad category, and I think when we're looking at Parks and Recreation, being general as much as possible, because we don't have the funds to be so specific and saying this is for this and this is for this and this is for this is important, but I do know that I've heard quite a bit of advocacy from groups around town that Parks and Rec does a good job at really serving the young populations, but what about other demographics? Not even just seniors, but rec leagues for older adults to connect and things like that. And again, resources are limited, but how do we foster that? How do we look at other age groups, find out who we're missing in getting people outdoors? What amenities would bring people outdoors to connect and things like that. I think that's I just want that noted.
I know that
Great.
I'm harping on this, but it comes back to people, climate and environmental leadership. The importance of shade, I just think is so important for elderly people, but you know, that's what kind of keeps me out of parks a lot of the times if there's no shade. So having, and I think about like spaces where parents can rest and sit and be in the shade while their kids are playing. So just that importance of being able to have generational spaces so that the grandparents aren't getting too tired. Because I think about in Park, well, that's what I call it. Sorry, Washington Park. But yeah, there's no shade there yet. It's just adjacent to the soccer fields where they have Driftless football has practices, right? So the way that it can function is older kids might be practicing soccer. Washington Park's right there. The younger kid might be playing. This is like years ago for me, but where do I sit down as a parent if I just want to kind of keep a spot? So just, I don't know if there's a term for that, but my kids are older now. That was usually, and I think that's the thing with Eckhart Park is that there was shade, there was a place to sit. And so it's kind of rare compared to some of the other parks.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I think it comes back to even just like the restroom amenities. If there is, one obstacle that might limit folks from lingering at a park or staying there even longer, then how do we address that? And I might see if there's a way to kind of scale that up into a goal or at least an action underneath. Yeah, thank you, Emma, for noting that.
I think Society Hollow is great for that because there's a restroom, there's a shelter, there's shade, there's a playground, and there's natural resources. So it's a place where you can spend hours and hours there.
Yes.
I was going to bring up community health and wellness. Would a park that has the different stations where there's different exercises, is that something that would fall under that category, something like that? Having a park that offered that? I don't know if it's
Sure.
must have a name.
Just exercise, fitness track type of thing you're talking about?
I guess there's stations and you do a certain exercise at each station.
Yeah, outdoor gyms, I've heard it called. Yep, and I've seen a couple examples in Wisconsin and Illinois too of hospitals will often be inclined to contribute to something like that. Seems like no-brainer to get some branding, name recognition. So yeah, with that.
Any other thoughts? I think this has been a really great discussion. Like Michael mentioned, we're going to take these and kind of draft them up. And then when we do our open house in a couple months, we'll have a bunch of these put forward, for you all and for the community to respond to and see if it was captured correctly and captured everything we're hoping to see. But yeah, anything else before we close out the discussion?
Yeah, I guess I got, I don't know how to make it a goal, but I know there is a large contingent in our area that would like to see outdoor pickleball courts, like courts that are specific for that. But I see it as like maybe an opportunity to make more of a multi-use kind of court system where there could be basketball if there was no one playing pickleball, that sort of thing. I don't, these are wants, obviously. I don't know how to deliver these, but yeah, that's, I guess, something that's top of my mind is like, how do we, I guess, address that want within our community?
Yep.
I I'm gonna sound, I might be completely unaware and there might be something similar to this because I think the library provides a lot of this sort of like midday activities. Are they doing things in the parks where they go out? I grew up in a city, it was a large city with a big budget, so that's the caveat, but they would have these essentially metal garden sheds, for lack of a better word, that were completely stocked with like art supplies or whatever. And there'd be like 2 hours a day in the afternoon, in the summer, we'd go and you would do the activities in the park. And I don't know, because I don't have athletic kids, I have arty kids, you know, and so that's just something where, and my kids are all older, so they're not interested in this stuff, but I just thought I'd mention it because that was something that you're in the neighborhood, you could run down but I don't know if the library does that right now, where there's like a place for them to set up.
Not a place right now. We've partnered with them to offer some different activities in parks, but
Yeah, it's more
not
up
a
to them.
consistent
Yeah.
schedule.
Yeah, gotcha.
Well, I think this, like I said, great discussion. We'll work on drafting some of this. Also, if you thought of anything, you know, if you think of something next week, it doesn't mean this has to be the end of the conversation on this. Feel free to share it with Kalen. He can share it with us or Cindy or Nate, and we'll keep the conversation going over the next few months as we work through the rest of the plan.
Yeah, and thank you. I have a lot to work with here, and that's a very good thing. I'll make sure that our team at least has some draft, like the whole suite of goals, our vision goals. I just want to make sure that we're providing something that you can see kind of the whole ecosystem. So it's not just going to be cleaned up goals or specific actions, but everything from beginning to end. So there's plenty to review and edit in the next couple months. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I guess is that all we need for the comp plan?
Kristen, I just noticed there's about 11 more slides here. Is there anything on those slides of
Oh.
content that you need to look at?
The final slide for Michael and Ashley was their next step slide. Just want to.
Yeah, and I had just kind of some backup slides if we needed to speak to them. They were just extra survey questions. So I think I had those there as an extra, but they're not necessary.
I did have another thought, but this goes back to essentially a different agenda item when it was just the comp plan. Can I address that now or?
Yeah, I mean, we're all part of the same agenda item here.
Okay. Because essentially right near my backyard is the new federal building that's being built. Armory. It's called something else. It's like a readiness prepared center. Do we have any anticipation if that's going to affect our population growth? I've heard, dare I say, rumors that people are going to be relocated here. And I didn't know if that was something that it was even on the city's radar.
I certainly think we should probably look into that more. My understanding is that it was regional, right? So if people are coming from Fort McCoy to here, I don't think they're moving residences. They're just changing to where they commute to. But again, that's just my basic understanding of it and some additional like thought into, okay, what does this do for us economically, recreationally, you know, from a housing standpoint would be important to know because it is quite a bit bigger, but how much bigger in scale and impact is unknown.
Just wanted it on the radar. So if nothing else, I guess we'll move on to second period for public comment.
Hello, my name is Krista Brown. I live at 703 Connor Street. Thank you for this opportunity for a collaborative meeting, to see an update and to be in part of the process of like goal setting. I made a lot of notes and I'll try to go really fast. I think that we also need to consider, so I know we have Viroqua growing forward. When I think about a lot of the like, maybe like hardship over being like, I don't know, how do we goal set? Part of me thinks we really need to hone in like, what are our values? and I'm just gonna throw something out that could be reacted to, or at least like it, maybe something that's in the comp plan could be partnering with someone to help us towards this. If we haven't already done that, I don't know for sure. But what if we had something that was like the 5 Fs? It was like food, farms, family, friends, and fun growing forward, where it's like, these are our priorities. This is who we are. This is what we've been. And this is where we're going. This is what we're going to prioritize. Something to consider that will help inform planning, but also implementing and prioritizing. The other cool thing about being in the drift list, as a lot of people know, but especially farmers know, is that because of the topography and the scale, you can't really get that huge because it just doesn't allow it. And humans also have this way of knowing, like, there's like a natural capacity to what we do in environments. So I'm excited to know that like we can't grow too big because it's just not going to work. The other thing about prioritizing zoning updates that allows for creative, higher density use in the development we already have is that we won't have sprawl, like kind of unnecessary sprawl. We'll have better conservation of our open space and we'll preserve farmland. So making sure that you understand like how those things really hinge together. Looking at that missing middle housing types, multifamily housing, pocket parks, ways to utilize all the spaces that we currently have that we really like. In our family and in my design philosophy, I always say, want better, not more. Do better with what we have, maintain what we have, before we just say like, let's add this out there and do this out there, because then we're just like in our cars driving further out. There are some creative ordinances that other places are doing that could help us a lot. There's one called the Truth and Sale of Housing Policy that would really allow us to help buyers and sellers. And it's really a stewardship of property. We believe in stewardship and conservation. We should be doing that with our buildings as much as our land. There's rent escrow, where if a tenant in any facility is having a problem that their landlord isn't solving, they pay their rent to the city and the city says, we'll repair it and then we'll issue you your rent. So it helps, again, in stewardship, but it also helps people who don't have the ability to be fixing things and don't have the money to get what they need. We should have a non-resident short-term rental policy that makes sure to account for all the ways that short-term rental owners, I've been one for 2 years in Minneapolis. It's very lucrative. We need to protect the people who are cleaning them and operating them. We need to possibly say, great, we can only have this many in the city. We can only have this many at all. If you're not going to live in it as your primary residence, right? There's like different loans that people are getting from companies. We should really be looking at all the ways. And I know there's like lawsuits and things, so like it's tricky, but we can do things to protect what housing we do have. I've been talking to Chad a little bit about like, how could we grant fund residential sprinkler systems so that there's a better first line of defense to getting to a property that's 30 minutes out, where we could actually avoid the whole thing burning to the ground and having to be rebuilt completely if a residential sprinkler system was implemented. And that could be something on Main Street, and that could be, so that's an idea. Adding city staff to help you all. I know that's probably like, where are we going to get the money? Goats. We need goats for Kale. Adding a maintenance person with the lens of conservation. There was this really great, like, how are we going to fix these weeds? Well, what are they? Conversation at the last Park and Rec meeting. It was like, what if we had somebody on staff who had that lens? Because then they're thinking and can help do these maintenance things creatively and not reactively. Maybe there's a way that, Kristen, you know of, that we can correlate these needs coming in and being added based on growth, based on like, how can we, maybe we can't add them today, but where's that tipping point? And how can this plan help us know that and not be like, well, yeah, it'd be great to have it, but how do we know? When do we know? Who do we want? Et cetera. I'm sorry, I have more. Notes and goals for maintenance. So there's this philosophy in mountain bike culture that you don't get to play unless you work. You help build the trails, you ride the trails. The trails aren't in good condition, you get off your bike and you help fix it. We can be doing that for all the ways we recreate. We can be doing that for all the ways that we sit at a park and weed with our children. We can really be teaching and modeling our children and to visitors that we help care for the places that we spend our time. I would love if our whole city was saying that and not just me and my husband in our house. Of like, yep, you want extras, then you're gonna have to do extras. It's just how we're gonna roll. Utilities. It'd be great if we had a compost pickup or collection site that's like for city residents who don't want to have that because we have skunks. Like, can we do something like that? Cultural incentives, thinking about collaboratively, so let's see, encouraging more people to
Kristen.
meet and gather.
You've,
I know, but where do I
I-
put all this?
Right.
Maybe somebody can respond to that eventually, but I've got more. There's so many more ways we can be setting goals to do better. Thank you.
thank you.
So very quickly, Angie Lawrence, I don't live in town. The Armory building, I looked into that in the past for us to use that for indoor pickleball. They would not permit us to do so. I don't know if the rules have changed with this new structure because it's much larger, but they had a hiring conflict and they had to have an actual employee in there in order to have anybody else in there. And so those were the rules with the existing Armory. So I just wanted to clarify that in case you were looking to utilize that service for some other reason, even though they were only using it one weekend a month. So I have been down that rabbit hole a little bit. And then the other question that I have is the old fire station, if perhaps that could be used through the Park and Rec. And there's land there as well if you're looking to put in some type of outdoor pickleball and have community usage, and you wouldn't have to hire anyone. There's codes. I've seen this in a lot of other places where there's a code that you use, you pay your money up front, whatever it is, and then you put in a code, you get it for that period of time. There's bathrooms there. Doesn't solve all that problem, but it does have high ceilings. I don't know what kind of waste is in there. That would obviously have to be assessed by all of you. But that's a really nice location, and pickleball can be loud, so you're not going to have too many people hopefully complaining about that if you set it up as an outdoor space. I'm all about collaboration. I know the school district has those tennis courts. It isn't perfect, but instead of rebuilding new outside, is there a way of collaborating with the school district to put nets up and a way to stop wind so that we could utilize and share some resources? There's bathrooms right there already, so that's something you don't have to maintain. That's all I've got for you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Public comment? Anyone online?
Think you're good, Steve.
All right. In that case, I guess we're looking for a motion to adjourn.
This is Seth. I make a motion that we adjourn.
I second that motion.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.